Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, a few weeks ago, I mentioned something that I think bears repeating. Hardly a week goes by that I'm not meeting with a spouse, a parent, or a sibling about the alcoholic or addict in their life, and the topic comes around to, when are they going to make amends? For those of you who haven't completed your Step 9, particularly if you've been in the program for a while, please be aware that just living differently and being a better person is not going to be enough, nor is it actually working the steps of our program. Sure, if I asked your friends and family if you're doing better, they will say that they have noticed changes, but they're still waiting for their amends. Most spouses and other family members will not be able to recite any one of the 12 steps, but you can be sure invariably they will know about Step 9, and I'm going to get asked when that's going to happen. And for good reason. We have lied to them, manipulated them, gaslighted them, and hurt them in ways that we may not even be aware of. They've been watching our progress, most of which is a mystery to them. Meetings, working on the steps, sponsors, service work. But almost without exception, they don't know what any of that means or over what period of time it happens. They can see changes and they're very hopeful that it's going to stick this time. And so they wait for their amends. So when they come into my office and ask the burning question, when am I going to get my amends? I'm often in a difficult spot because I don't know the answer, and it's different for everyone to an extent. One thing I do know is that if the addict or alcoholic has been in the program for a year or more and hasn't started the amends process, then procrastination better be on their defects of character list. And so should being inconsiderate. Now that might come across as a bit harsh, but let's talk about the reality of what has gone on and what, if the shoe was on the other foot, we would like to have happen to us. And let's look to Scripture to do that. There are 3 passages tonight that I would like to refer to which give us direction in this matter. The first is Jesus speaking in the book of Luke, chapter 6, verse 31, when he says, "Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you." Simple. We're to treat others the way we would want to be treated, and that's why we make amends. If we had been hurt by someone, we would want them to make amends and make things right, so we do the same. And we need to remember that amends is not just an apology or I'm sorry for a wrongdoing. Most everyone close to us has heard that many, many times, only for us to do the same thing again, or maybe even worse. And the pain they feel is due to lack of trust and due to our lack of integrity. The most widely accepted way to offer an amends is to simply state, "I did," fill in the blank, and what can I do to make that right for you? A huge part of our Step 9 goes back to our inventories. In these, we often find that we're pretty angry at those people we have resentments against. As we work through our resentments inventory, we find that we have played some role in it. And that's often hard for us to recognize. And when it comes to doing our Step 9, still being angry for what they have done can trip us up and keep us trapped in our resentments and block us from doing our amends. We must remember that this is about cleaning our side of the street, no matter what they have done. Our spiritual direction in this comes directly out of a prayer which we say every Sunday night at the end of the service, the Lord's Prayer, which says, Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And this can be found in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 12. In this prayer, we are asking God to forgive us for our wrongs. But, and it's a big but, it says that receiving God's forgiveness is contingent on us forgiving those who have wronged us. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So we accept our part and we make our amends. It sounds simple, right? It is simple, like the program, but not easy. First of all, because of our drinking and drugging, the list has become pretty long, so it's intimidating. And second, some of the things we have done, if we're rigorously honest, have been pretty bad. So shame starts to block us. We get into a shame spiral and start beating ourselves up, and we start to hear the old tapes playing in our heads about what a horrible person we are, what a failure, what a loser, and we want to run away from those feelings. And the easiest way to run is to avoid step 9. But we must remember that the easiest thing and the right thing are seldom the same thing. But if we want to repair relationships and work our program, we need to work through the shame and find the humility needed to take this step. Humility and honesty are the foundation of our recovery program. So let's talk for a minute about honesty. If we're not honest, we will lie, cheat, steal, and lie to ourselves. We have all told numerous lies. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking, and I've encountered people like this, I don't lie, but everyone lies. So we all lie, and every lie that we tell begins with a lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves that no one will know, that it isn't important, and that nobody will get hurt. But that's not true. We know it is important, and every time we lie, we hurt ourselves because we eat away at our integrity, one lie at a time. We will also lie to ourselves about why we can't make amends to someone, why they may be hurt, or that what they have done, or by doing part of a living amends. So let's bring it back into focus by keeping it simple. If someone has hurt us, we would want them to make an amends. So we do the same. Do unto others. Also, the Big Book tells us that we have to make direct amends wherever possible. And by direct amends, they mean face-to-face. Now, step 9 is so important that 7 pages are devoted to explaining how we go about it and giving examples. And this section ends with this paragraph. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Now, why would you not want to do your step 9 at the expense of not having those promises come true? Remember, step 9 says make direct amends. They don't mean living amends. So let's talk for a minute about living amends. They are often talked about and often misused. Nowhere in the Big Book does the term living amends appear. And we have to be careful not to use this phrase as a way to skirt around doing a proper step 9. Or we might run the risk of repairing relationships or even further damaging them or not having the promises come true. Now, living amends are a simple concept. Making a living amends means living a completely new lifestyle and being committed to that lifestyle, in part for those you have harmed and in part for yourself. Living amends means making genuine changes, that our behaviors and actions are true and honest, and following an emotionally sober path, instead of making apologies only to go and repeat the same old behaviors and reopen old wounds over and over. We now commit to living a clean, sober, and honest life. Living amends are, simply put, living the steps and practicing the principles. And that's the way we're supposed to be living. Living amends can be a way of living a new life and a substitute for direct amends when direct amends cannot be made. But we can't substitute living amends instead of making direct amends if direct amends are possible. This is an example of where we have to be careful not to be lying to ourselves or deceiving ourselves because of fear and shame. We can't hide behind our living amends to rationalize not doing a proper step 9. So I'm going to tell a little story here about rationalizing step 9 and using living amends instead. And it comes from a support group that I used to do a number of years ago for significant others. I've been doing this support group and working with this particular lady for about 4 or 5 years. And as invariably happened, a lot of the other spouses that were in the group started talking about step 9 and amends, and that their husband or wife hadn't done amends to them. And I looked at this one lady, and she was sitting in tears because her husband had been sober for about 4 or 5 years. And I asked her what was going on. And she said, "I've been waiting for my amends since the day he came out of treatment." And he had told her that what he was doing was a living amends. And she had just learned that that wasn't good enough, that that wasn't properly working a step. So I had to walk her through that, and unfortunately for her husband, I got to see him the next night in a support group. So I had the opportunity to talk to him about the difference between a step 9 and a living amends, and they seem to get things squared away, and things are going much better in their relationship now. But he thought he could get away with living amends, but the look on his wife's face and the tears that she cried told me a completely different story. Now, I am going to give some suggestions for living amends, the way they should look, but remember, what I'm suggesting here is a way that we should be living, and for most of us, the way we were not living when we were active in our addiction. We should all be practicing living amends every day. Here are 5 simple steps for living amends. 1, rather than making apologies and then repeating old behaviors and reopening old wounds, commit to a sober and healthy life. This means committing to never going back to the old ways that originally hurt those close to you. It also means to stop reminding your loved ones of the past hurts done to you. 2, fulfill a promise that you had made to someone in the past, but that you didn't keep because you were active in your addiction. For example, perhaps you promised a loved one to help paint a room, but your addiction caused that promise to go by the wayside. Living amends means showing up with a can of paint and paintbrushes and being ready to paint that room. 3, living amends means actively improving relationships in your life with a concerted and focused effort. Visit relatives more often, mentor young people you know, teach people close to you skills you are good at, or make time for a regular date night with your partner. 4, Living amends means giving of yourself. When you were in the throes of addiction, it was all about you and your needs. Now that you're committed to a sober life, make it all about others. Volunteer your time to help your favorite charity or cause. And here's a few examples: chairing a meeting, being a sponsor, volunteering at the church, working in a soup kitchen, helping out at an animal shelter, or donating your time to any worthy cause that resonates with you. And 5, don't keep apologizing for your past mistakes. You likely made apologies over and over when you were using, so your loved ones have heard them all before. Instead, stay focused on your behaviors and being of service to them. Offer to do chores or spend time with loved ones, wash a car, mow a lawn, visit with an elderly relative, or do anything else that's useful and considerate, because actions speak louder than words. Let's get back to how important it is to make amends in a timely fashion. Again, turning to Scripture, this is what Jesus had to say about the importance of reconciliation, making amends. From Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 to 24. Now, this is a passage of Scripture that I've used before, but it's so powerful, and it points directly at our step 9 when Jesus says, "So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly realize that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person. Then come back and offer your sacrifice to God." That scripture highlights the importance of setting things right as soon as we can. It really can't be much more clear. It puts the importance of making things right ahead of making a sacrifice to God, essentially ahead of worship. That's how important it is. I think every one of us who has struggled with addiction wants to repair damage and improve relationships. In fact, I think all of us could benefit from being conscious about improving relationships. I think all of us would be happier if we improved our relationships, and I think the world would be a better place. So if you're working on step 9, or even if you think you've completed it, think about what you could do to make your relationships better. I think one of the best ways to do that is to first think about what you hope for or from other people that you are in relationship with. Would you hope for more kindness? Would you hope for more attention? Would it be more conversation? Would it be them showing more interest in you and less in themselves? Would it be keeping commitments? Would it be spending more time? How would you like to be treated? Now ask yourself, do I treat everyone that I'm in a relationship with the same way I want to be treated? Now ask yourself, if someone hurts you, would you want them to make an amends and try to make things right? Ask yourself, would you want them to make those amends right away? Would it be more meaningful if they made amends as soon as they realized they had hurt you? Or if they had waited 6 months or a year or 2? Would it be okay if they just ignored what they had done and hoped that you would forget or figure out by observing how much they had changed and that they were sorry? Some people will use fear and shame as an excuse to relapse when they get to step 9. So sometimes a recovery will fail as a result of being unwilling to take this step. And sometimes relationships will fail for the same reason. Sometimes people will get tired of waiting for direct amends, that is our step 9, and not accept that a living amends is enough. Sometimes the hurt is so deep that only an amends will start the process of reconciliation. Do unto others